Good afternoon, everybody. If I may, we are still waiting for panelists, but let me start to welcome you here in European House. Some of you are familiar faces, some of you are new to me, but I hope that we will have chance during this first day of the Enlargement Forum, which I'm very glad to thank for organizing our long-term partner, European think tank, dealing with the European agendas. And we are here in Czech Republic, so you might know that Czech Republic is, unfortunately, according to the latest numbers from Eurobarometer, not such a big fan in terms of the public population of the enlargement and the enlargement policy of the European Union currently. So I hope that these days, today and tomorrow, there will be a chance to discuss this issue, what the enlargement means, what benefit it brings to the countries inside the European Union, but also for the candidate countries themselves. So there will be a lot of time for the discussion, but let me allow to say just one thing. We are at the end of the year 2025, and the European Commission is preparing for the 2026. And the draft program of the European Commission got the name, and the name is European Independence Moment. Independence in all senses you can imagine, because we are now living in a very difficult times, that there are forces which might have been also allies before, and they want to see the European Union on the knees. They want to see the fragmented European Union not united. And united and reunited European Union is one of the themes for the enlargement as such. So the independence and reunification will be the two topics for the next year of the European Commission. Welcome again. We will have time to discuss, and I hope that you will pose the critical questions which all of us needs to look for answers. And now I would like to give the floor to Martin Vokálek, the director of EUROPEUM, for his welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monika. As it was said, my name is Martin Vokálek from EUROPEUM Institute for European Policy, and we are really glad that we can cooperate together with the European Commission representation here in Prague. But we have also many other partners for this whole conference, so I would need my notes. But let me start with saying that the enlargement is a dear topic to us, and it is not only the technical process. It has become a strategic, political and security issue for the entire continent. And we need to navigate this issue with the complexity as it is, and we need to navigate it between institutions, diplomats, analysts and a civil society to provide them with a platform where they can speak honestly and openly about it. At the same time, it is very important to include also citizens, because the citizens must be in those discussions, as the future of our common European project includes them as well, and it includes also enlargement, and their say is very vital for it. So reflecting this spirit, we are aiming for those 2 days conference, but also for the projects we are doing to provide a bridge, the bridge for EU institutions and national capitals, the bridge between member states and candidate countries, and also equally a bridge between policymakers, experts, and a society, including the citizens. So we are trying to bring those voices together in one room and treat enlargement not only as a Brussels-centered exercise, but really as a genuinely European conversation shaped all over across the continent. So today and tomorrow, we will be connecting the perspectives from the candidate countries, the perspectives from our partners from other organizations, and we will be focusing on the political will, administrative capacity, and also public trust on the enlargement. And this wouldn't be possible without our partners. So let me please thank our partners of this conference, who are the European Commission and the European Commission representation here in Prague. Then also the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, the Embassy of Germany, Embassy of Slovenia, EU Institute for Security Studies, and also the Association of the International Affairs, AMO. Cooperation with those organizations is really essential for this forum, and also it creates this kind of genuine platform we are meeting at. This platform wouldn't be possible also to create without more than 40 guests who are coming today and tomorrow to Prague from all over countries across Europe, and they will be the active part of the 2025 EU Enlargement Forum. At the same time, it is very important to mention that this forum is a part of the larger project EUROPEUM is leading. The project is called Reuniting East and West, reflection of the 2004 EU Enlargement. And I would like to warmly acknowledge and thank our all partners who are long-term active with us in the project. Some of them are already sitting here with you. Some others are coming later for the other parts of the forum. But without them, this kind of long-term project wouldn't be possible. Those partners are Egmont Royal Institute for International Relations from Belgium. It's the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, Finnish Institute of International Affairs, College of Eastern Europe from Poland, then Prague Cyprus Center, then Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy from Greece, and last but not least also Istituto Affari Internazionali from Italy. Your commitment to deepening the debate and building on the evidence-based policy research is key to us, and thank you for this. So we really appreciate it. And last but not least, just let me mention that the enlargement is not automatic and it's not inevitable. But when we create these platforms, we then can connect expertise, experience, and political realities to strengthen the condition for enlargement to succeed in the upcoming years. So thank you all for being here. Please do not hesitate to ask questions throughout those 2 days. And with this being said, I would like to pass the word to my dear colleague Liliana Cvetanovská, our head of research and deputy director at EUROPEUM, who would be moderating the first panel. So Liliana, the floor is yours, and thank you all for being here with us.
So thank you once again, and from myself, for joining us today to kick off the Enlargement Forum with our first session. And we're going to start by focusing on lessons for the next enlargement by trying to learn from the past experiences of enlargements from the first enlargement wave from 2004. To kickstart our discussion today, we have 4 speakers, each with their own unique experience within the enlargement process. And each panelist, I would like to ask if you wouldn't, if you could please speak for between 3 and 5 minutes, just to give us some opening remarks on your thoughts in relation to lessons for the next enlargement, after which we will open the discussion for the audience, and we will allow for a series of questions to be gathered and then give floor to our panelists to answer. So without further ado, considering that we have a limited time of just about 1 hour and 10 minutes, I would like to start our session by inviting Eli Gateva, who is lecturer at the University of Oxford, to start, followed by Monika Ladmanova, who is head of the European Commission representation in the Czech Republic, after which Pavel Telička, chief negotiator for the accession of the Czech Republic in the European Union, and last but not least, Harry Tsimitras, director of the Peace Research Institute of Oslo Prague Cyprus Center. So Eli, if you would not mind starting our discussion with an opening statement of the
Perfect. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I would like to focus on 4 key points which I think are important in terms of rethinking and reimagining the ongoing enlargement process. So the first point, which I think is important and which worked really well in the context of the 2004 enlargement, was vision. There was a clear vision for the EU enlargement process, but importantly, there was a very clear vision for the future of the European integration. And here I would like to stress is that I don't want to say that the deepening of the European integration should take hostage the widening of European integration. I think it's important that two processes are not only taking place simultaneously, but much more importantly, that they are fully aligned. And here I would like to say, I mean, again, today is also an important anniversary. We've had 16 years since the Treaty of Lisbon has been enforced. So clearly rethinking the future of the European Union and European integration is not for the sake of enlargement, is much more broadly for the sake of the union that we are trying to build together. So that's why, and many have argued it's long overdue. It is important to have a clear long-term vision for the future of the political union and for the future of the union that we would like to build together. So I would encourage politicians and policymakers to be bold and creative and make sure that they deliver with a broader plan for the future of our common union. The second point, which I think is also key and important and has definitely contributed to the success of the Eastern enlargement, has been political leadership. So strong political leadership, not just from the EU institutions or from key member states, but also from domestic political leaders in the candidate countries. There is, again, this question about political leadership. Obviously, we've had a new term of office for the European Commission, a new Commissioner for Enlargement, and they have outlined their vision for the EU accession process. But I think it is important that we have strong enlargement champions for the future of the European enlargement to be, again, a successful endeavor. And I mean, again, clearly this is important not just to be delivered rhetorically, but much more importantly, consistently throughout, particularly to domestic audiences. And I know that this is a big challenge, but I do believe that having strong leadership is important. This leads me to the 2 points which I genuinely believe that there is room for improvement compared to what we have learned from the 2004 enlargement. And this is the point about support for EU enlargement process. I mean, again, I have looked at the public opinion data before in the context of the 2004 enlargement. Again, there wasn't a particularly high level of political support, but I think that much more importantly, now communication needs to be substantially enhanced. When I was doing interviews for my research, Commission officials have acknowledged that perhaps communication and particularly articulating the benefits of enlargement needs to be done in a much more consistent manner. We talk about the challenges of enlargement consistently. We consistently talk about what candidate countries need to do, but I think it's important to also very carefully articulate what are the benefits of enlargement for the future of a European project. And I think that this links back to the question about broader vision. And the final point that I want to raise, being mindful that we don't have too much time, is about participation in terms of including candidate countries on a more equal footing in the process of enlargement and in the process of reimagining our shared future together. The way that we have studied, but also sometimes prepared for EU enlargement, has often ignored local expertise in this context from Central and Eastern Europe. And I think it's key to acknowledge this as a strength as well in the future and for the future of the European Union. So drawing much more extensively on domestic knowledge, because I believe, particularly even after accession, had candidate countries from Central and Eastern Europe been more actively listened to and their concerns taken into consideration, I don't think that we will be in the position that we are currently in. So local knowledge from Central and Eastern Europe could help and should reinforce the position of the EU as a global player.
Thank you very much for opening our session with those key 4 very, very important points. And I would come back to them later. Especially, I'm interested to discuss the element of support a bit more, because it is, I think, key of how we present the benefits, as you said, of enlargement. But before we go into the discussion, I would like to give the word to Monika Latmanova to tell us a bit more of your perspective, the European Commission's perspective on lessons learned from enlargement.
Thank you, Susanna. And I just realized that I didn't introduce myself during the welcoming remarks. So how arrogant from me. Because, yes, I represent the European Commission. I'm the head of the representation of the European Commission here in Czech Republic. And I'm sure that you all read the recent enlargement report published by the European Commission. Yes, you did. Okay, very good. Just a few words from me. First, in any defining moment of the history, the enlargement of the European Union always had played an important and remarkable role. When we take the 1980s enlargement of the new democracies, Spain, Portugal, or Greece, or the 2004 the Big Bang enlargement. However, and nevertheless, I still think that the experience from the enlargement from the past cannot be taken as a master for the future enlargement, because we are living, and I've already said that in my welcoming remarks, we are living in a very different and difficult times these days. So if we are talking about the enlargement today, we have to make sure that any progress which is made with the new member states is credible, because how the European Union operates, it is built on trust among the member states. So that's my first remark, that the enlargement needs to be based on trust and on the merit, as always stated by the European Commission. Then second, the times we are living are bringing new challenges, and there needs to be a clear safeguards built into the accession treaties, which will mean for the others the safeguards for what will happen if somebody is not playing according to the rules. Because again, there has been a different experiences in the past years regarding the unity within the European Union. So what kind of safeguards this needs to be? They need to go unnoticed by the new member states, but they need to be strong enough for the member states themselves to know that there is a process for the situations which are as challenging as they are today. And the third, I think that there is a time to even enlarge the enlargement, because we know how important this process is for the citizens living in the candidate countries, and we know how much time it takes to the current member states to take the decision. So I think that it is really worth and also credible for the current European Union to be open and say how much enlargement it is possible for the moment we are living in today. But I'm happy to discuss further.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Monika, for those remarks. Absolutely. So key 3 points to which I'm sure we will come back during our discussion, especially on both creating safeguards so that everybody knows what their role is, and to actually make sure that we provide both credible enlargement process where potential new citizens know when and under what conditions they can join in. However, I think key element that you mentioned was that we cannot just copy and paste the same old blueprint that we have done in 2004, because the situation is very different now. And on that note, moving on to Pavel Telička, who was the chief negotiator for the accession of the Czech Republic in the European Union. If you can give us your thoughts and views on how that process went, and what lessons can be learned for the current enlargement process. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Well, I'm sure we'll use the debate hopefully to answer as much as one can your questions, because this is really an issue on which one could and has written a book. But should I, in front of the bracket, say that whatever I will say should not lead you to the conclusions that I'm skeptical on enlargement. On the contrary, whether still outside the EU or during my time in Coreper, in the Commission, the Parliament, I was always a strong advocate of enlargement. And even today, I do support some of the governments of the candidate countries in their process. But I'll have to be blunt. Maybe one could start by saying that the mistake that some of us have made in the 90s and probably to some extent is being repeated today is that the enlargement is a goal and that the accession itself, is the D-Day, while I would say enlargement is a process and membership is a tool to participate on European integration, which means that on the day of accession, the new member state should be clear about what is its European policy. What can be expected from that new member state? What are going to be the values, the principles, the key priorities, where it will be in the mainstream, where it might have domestic difficulties, which will be pushing that member state sometimes into a less constructive role. And I do remember a conversation that I had back in 2003, so after having signed the accession agreement with, at that time, Deputy Secretary General of the Council, Pierre de Boissier, many of you probably know him, and I was at a lunch and I was saying, and with Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, believe me, I don't remember what the issue was, and he said, what? I said, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and he said, not who are they, he said, what are they? Basically, in an amusingly arrogant but deliberately so way, he was saying, we still do not know what we can expect from the new member states. And he continued, we might know better a couple of those, but less others. And this is still what we are facing. And that is why when the director of EUROPEUM a few minutes ago was saying that it is not inevitable and basically, paraphrase, not guaranteed, this is also an experience that we should bear on our mind. That while this is definitely a priority, we've got, let's say, the roadmap, we are on track, but it is a process with a lot of still question marks and a process which may be successful, may be hugely successful, but may still also fail because some might not make it, or some of the some of the member states of the European Union might have difficulties, and it might be even the public opinion. Two short remarks, and I'll close my opening on that. And that is that, when I talk to the countries, it is a technically driven process with, let's say, a political priority being set. But I'm not sure, and that was also the case of the Czech Republic and some others, that the technical and the political aspects of the process match during the whole time. Sometimes you see the maturity of the technical aspects, sometimes of the political, but you need the two to match in order to make it happen. And the final remark is that, and that's also maybe a lesson, and that is that throughout the process we thought, and legitimately so, that we are well prepared, we are well equipped, and we know what the negotiations are about, and nothing can surprise us. Well, we were wrong. Basically, each day of the process brought something new, but to both sides. I think it was an unprecedented process also for the EU. It was a learning process. I mean, get to know each other. So I think that I'm here a little bit cautious, and I'm cautious also the countries that, in fact, the real issues and the difficulties are yet to come. Sorry to be very, very brief, but I'm sure that we'll have more time to address real issues of your interest in the debate, and therefore I would skip further monologue from my side. Thank you.
for debate.
Many thanks for having me, and I apologize because it's not that enough that it was mediocre anyway. Now I add a horrible state of health in it, so apologies beforehand. Now, let me build exactly on what Mr. Telichka was saying in two ways. One is that the European Union has never been more important, to my mind, and never been more challenged. And secondly, we need to have a narrative that is convincing both to the people of the EU as they stand and the neighbors, those that wish to accede, others that will never accede but have a relationship with, and so on and so forth. So, in a sense, I'm saying that this is the most challenging time because to me, the European Union is par excellence a community of principles. And thankfully so, in the sense that now we see the erosion of principles and norms internationally. To harsh critics, you'd say that perhaps the rules-based international order as we knew it is dead or in the process of dying. You have the normalization of bullying and the legitimization of the exception. And obviously friends and enemies are not forever in international relations. And our transatlantic relations show us that this is now true for enemies. So we cannot take things for granted. And hence the European Union is both super challenged, but I think extremely important to reconvince itself, its people, and its associates that is still relevant. So in a sense, we need, I think, to bridge realism with principles. We need to go beyond the introversion, sometimes the technical, as you say, and see really the political in a footstep. You know, the legitimization crisis internally and externally that the EU has been going through. It's high time that we deal with it and get it over with, because I think the challenges we're going to be facing are unprecedented, absolutely, until now. In doing so internally, I think we need to revisit a little bit the gaps that a bit of a challenge. What I mean to say is that now that the discussion is going par excellence in the way of security, and that's very much understandable, there is no shared perception of security in the North and South. If you combine this, I mean, to be very simple, I can see what the security dilemma would be from the Northern European partners, from the Baltics, from Germany, from Poland, and all, vis-a-vis Russia. It's very difficult to have a convincing argument to the Portuguese, to the Spaniards, to the Greeks, to the Cypriots on this, because it simply doesn't resonate. And it might be a matter of communication, but it also be a matter of conceptualization. Similarly, in the Middle East, where we spend a lot of our efforts in bringing them closer to Brussels, I'm very sorry to say that perhaps we're not doing a very good work in conveying the right messages. So you have a very much of a schizophrenic relationship where everything that comes from Brussels has a little bit of a metaphysical quality from it. Oh, it came from Brussels, it must be good. And at the same time, a huge legitimization crisis, a crisis of credibility, and all. And I think it's on us to convey the right messages in a pragmatic way, because it's the first time that I think we need to go global. It's not enough to have a technical, important, but technical, a little bit introvert discussion between us on, as you were rightly saying to me, the accession as a goal in itself. Lastly, and I think we can come back to this, I think it's extremely important that we do not replicate mistakes of the past, in particular the importation in the European Union of actual or potential conflicts, because we've seen what happens with that. We can discuss a little bit more if you like. I think this has entails an existential threat, if you like, as well as a threat of legitimacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that final remark. And I think you brought in another new and very important element, which is that we need to consider the European Union also as an international actor as well, that both has attitude and roles towards third countries, but also as one of the key international players in both setting policies, but also thinking about security and ensuring democracy and good governance also beyond the borders of the European Union and beyond the borders even of member states, as we know that there are third country actions from the European Union that are going beyond the European soil. So thank you everybody for those opening remarks, and I think we've touched upon several very important issues. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to the audience. We can take perhaps 2 or 3 questions. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and then we can, and if you have the question for a specific panelist, do let us know. If not, you can just ask the question, and then we can see who of the panelists would like to provide an answer. And the microphone, okay, we will have Christina that will pass the microphone. We had 1 question here, and then we have 2 and 3. So this will be our first round of questions. That's the first hand I saw.
There we go. I'll stand up so you can see me. Hi, my name is Martz. I'm from the Latvian Institute of International Affairs. I'm the head of our EU research program. And I wanted to touch a little bit upon the specific aspect of treaty reform and reform and in parallel to enlargement. And I wanted to understand a little better how you envision that process, because in my mind, having a very different perspective on that matter, it's I don't see it as, while in principle it seems like it could be something parallel, but in practice it seems that it detracts political capital, it detracts human resources capital, and some member states, some candidate countries will face a longer enlargement. And also the question is if we start doing treaty reform now, then what do we take those resources away from? Do we take them away from competitiveness? Do we take them away from security? We have limited resources available to us. And finally, the last point on treaty reform that I'd like input on is the aspect of, well, we see it as a tool for deeper enlargement and deeper integration usually, but we shouldn't rule out the political calculus that it can also be a tool for reduced enlargement, reduced integration within the European continent. What we're seeing right now is a clawing back of national competences in practice, and the opening of the treaties right now sometimes seems like a Pandora's box, where if we start talking about this, well, then maybe states will want to take back national competences on justice and home affairs, on migration, on issues related to finances and budget, and a lot of these cross-border elements. So there's also a very difficult political calculus that needs to be taken into consideration right now that might complicate the possibility of treaty reform. I understand the argument of if not now, then when, but also it does seem that now might be the worst time, and maybe the best time was 6 or 7 years ago. And then, well, I think it's an open question, when next, if not now, and I'd like your input on that as well. Thank you very much.
I would say yes, thank you very much for the first one. Let's collect questions 2 and 3, and then we can have a round of discussion across the panel, please.
Oh, thank you very much. My name is Aleš Balot, and I'm the ambassador of Slovenia here to the Czech Republic. And maybe, I listened to the last speaker, and you mentioned that we shouldn't import conflict into the EU. So I wasn't very sure instinctively how to understand that. Did you think about bilateral issues, so that basically different member states should not somehow bilateralize the negotiations, or did you have any kind of specific situation in mind, like Ukraine, so that Ukraine, for example, has to resolve its own issue with Russia first? So just a clarification from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have the...
Hello, and my name is Rolandas Kačinskas. I'm the Lithuanian ambassador here to the Czech Republic. I have a question probably to all of you, and a hypothetical one. Let's imagine or even speculate how the Europe would look like if there hadn't been enlargement in 2004. Let's say for the Baltic states, I imagine that instead of the growing modern economies, democracies, very European value-based countries, we would have seen probably a gray zone, which all the consequences it entails, not only for us, but the rest of Europe. So in your imagination, how would you think the situation would be today, if not for the enlargement? And what does it tell for the future enlargements? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think now we can maybe go with a round of discussion from the panelists, and the first question was about reforms of the enlargement process. Was it for somebody specific, or did you want to get a general feedback? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So as before, we're going to start with Ellie. And Ellie, if you could talk a little bit more about the question and comment on the reforms.
Yes. As you rightfully mentioned, 6 or 7 years ago would have been the best time. But I mean, I think the fundamental question that needs to be ideally resolved now is how we imagine a European Union, 30 plus member states, up to 35 or 36. I mean, Iceland might decide to join again the accession process. Norway is considering this option. So what we have now is not just about decision making. So it's no longer about, oh, what if one member state decides to hijack this process? Ultimately, we need to completely reimagine the European Union. And the sooner we have this kind of vision for what a union of 35, for example, member states would look like, what are our strengths? What do we want to achieve together? I think that these questions are very important to be answered now, because this ultimately will allow people who would like to champion enlargement to clearly demonstrate how enlargement is the solution to the problems that we are currently facing. So I think it is important to have a pan-European discussion, because European Union continues to be a work in progress. So we have not reached a final destination, but then if we want to have certain competences backed to nation states, that's perfectly fine. But let's all agree together and have a common shared vision, because this is what will help us advance in a world where we seem now to stand all by ourselves, because these are some of the key points that were previously mentioned before that. We have this unique moment, which could be an opportunity to completely reimagine what we can do together as a continent, as a union of more than 35 member states. And then if we decide that we only want to, I don't know, trade together, that's perfectly fine, but have this conversation now in the current context. I think it's crucial, because this will give us the blueprint for where we want to be. Before that, in the context of the 2004 enlargement, we had the LOR plan, which was put in place before enlargement for a vision for an economic and political union. We had Agenda 2000, which provided a tight schedule for the delivery of the enlargement. We cannot have, and I'm sure the DGN is doing their best work to plan for the future enlargement, but without having this piece where European integration is going, it's possible, but many more problems would come down the road if we don't answer these big questions. So that's why I think it's important to answer them now. Is it politically feasible? We'll have to wait and see, but I think that we should be asking these questions. Sorry. Yeah, I could go on. Obviously, I feel very strongly about it, but I think these are important questions we should answer, not just for the sake of enlargement, for the sake of the union.
Thank you very much, Ellie. And I think if we have the time towards the end, we could potentially imagine of actually how this discuss and try to imagine how this reimagination could look like, and whether it's actually feasible to even have some sort of an agreement at this point during the current climate. But I will leave that for the end of our session if time permits. And then we had a second question, which I believe was addressed towards Harry, and the question was, or whether when we talk about security and whether we talk about security and importing conflicts, are we talking more about the situation with Ukraine, or are we talking more about the bilateral situations and disputes across candidate countries, or potentially even both?
No worries. I had something very specific in mind, indeed, of the case of Cyprus, where I'm now stationed. And I'm saying this for two reasons. One, the specific, and the other, the general. In the specific, in the sense that, we can go on and on discussing whether it has been a successful experiment, with if it has been as per treaty, beneficial for all citizens, promoting the internal peace and security. None of this is in place. And I'm afraid that the EU has also become a bit of a tool in a conflict that has many facets, and international, local, and everything, but where if one of the of the two sides is now a member of the EU, then the utilization of it has been quite, I think. So in a sense, the EU has become a party of the issue, or vice versa. The issue has become a European issue as such. And then the question could be, is this something we could see replicated in the Balkans, in the case of Kosovo, for instance, just again, theoretically, as you say. That, I think, is important, but also in ways that it affects the external relations of the Union. You know, now I think to me is a high time that we have a very honest discussion with Turkey, and I'm not quite sure if we can do that in very practical terms. Same with the veto discussion, for instance, you know, and on and on and on. So, in a sense, although the intent might have been noble, in practical terms, it has become a bit of an obstacle for EU policies. That's what I had in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think this, to an extent, touches on some of the points that you were making, which were having a technical process versus a political process. So I wanted to check if you would be able to also comment to an extent on your views.
Me?
Yes, yourself. Sorry.
Well, can I somehow merge the questions? It's going to help me in making a couple of points. First of all, I think, and that's also a lesson learned, enlargement has changed the European Union. Let's face it. And it has not changed the European Union just for the better. I mean, we don't have to go too far. We can look at the European Council. We can look at some of our neighbors. We can look into Czech itself. We can look at the forecasts of what can be expected from the new Czech government on European integration. So in reality, there has been a significant impact, and there I would agree with Mrs. Gateva that there are good reasons to have what one would call, in a bit of a cliche, deepening of the European Union, because then you do have a little bit of stronger immunity to these implications. So that's for sure. Now, does it mean, returning now to the Latvian gentleman, whether we should aim at deepening? I take the point of debating it, yes. But on what level? Who? Among whom? I mean, it would be great if the Latvian Institute, your institute, EUROPEUM and others would come and have a debate. I mean, really, have an avalanche through Europe and come with a paper. That I would find probably something significant, meaningful, not just that it would come from, let's say, below, but I think it would be meaningful. I don't see today a debate which would really lead to getting the EU in a better shape, led by Le Pen's, Wilders, Babiš's, Fico's, Orban's, and so on. This is the situation. I mean, and I agree with you. You have mentioned the Pandora box shortly after I thought of it myself, and I do use that example from time to time. So the time should also be to some extent opportune, because if you open the Pandora box, believe me, half of the EU leaders, if not more, would be pleased to dismantle the European Union today in different areas. Yeah? Someone would feel that security is rushing too far, maybe the Portuguese, the Spaniards, and so on. Someone would say, we have done too much on digital. Anyway, this is happening already today. We came with the digital legislation, so somebody thinks that it went too far. Emissions, the same thing. So I think that it would be a cherry picking, and I am not sure that we are in the best of shape. Now, I would agree with the counter-argument that making enlargement in today's situation is more risky. Yeah, it could, again, if I say that enlargement had implications on the EU and not just positive, then I would say, yes, we could have more negatives coming in, and it wouldn't have to be just import of bilateral conflicts or a bilateral problem. So I think that it's extremely difficult. It requires, and there I agree with you, Mrs. Gateva, vision, leadership. The problem that I have is that I lack the leadership. Yeah, to able to really maybe go not with a huge process, but We've got security issues, and there's good reason to advance. But would the advancement go, would there be a consensus? I think we would see a lot of new member states, really pushing hard, the French, maybe the Germans, would we see the Portuguese or would the Spaniards or some others, aiming in the same direction? I don't think so. And on other issues, the let's say, member states really driving would be different. So I think that it would be good to have political agenda, a bit of a vision. I would rather go for more limited. I would not expect a great deal of deepening, but maybe it could lead to some kind of revitalization that we desperately need, because I don't think the EU is in great shape. And then finally, I would say that maybe enlargement, even if it comes closer, and the question is what the enlargement will look like. People speak of gradual enlargement. Is it a bad concept or is it a good concept? Is it a concept to delay enlargement, or is it a concept to speed up or to make enlargement happen so that it would go through the process and through the referendums, etc.? So I really think that we need a political agenda on a few areas where we need to deliver, and where we have a better chance to deliver might not lead to deepening, or at least might not lead to a better decision making, because we're going to have 30, 33, 35, whatever. But maybe this will lead to something that has been debated in the past, that there will be in some areas different speed of integration, and maybe some of the new members that are yet to exceed will be those driving, and then the Baltics and maybe Czechia and the French and so on, and other issues somebody else. So I'm afraid that it's not just about decision making. We will see a bit more of variable, I don't want to use geometry, but variable, let's say, elements in the debate, but also in some of the policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Telička, and you touched upon not just on the issue at hand, but also potentially.
Sorry if I went beyond my mandate.
No, which is even better, because it leads us very nicely to the last question that we had from the audience, and that actually asks us, well, if it's going to be so problematic, and there are so many different issues that we need to consider, how should we take the past experiences? And what should we learn from them today? And especially, what would have happened if we didn't have the 2004 enlargement? So in light of the third question, how would the EU look like if there was no enlargement in 2004? And is this something that we should maybe pay a little bit more attention to in order to find a way to overcome some of the obstacles that Mr. Telička just outlined? Mr. Admanova?
Not only EU, but the whole continent.
Or the continent as a whole as well.
That's a good question, because I myself was a witness when a person working for the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs at a public event in Berlin said that in 2014 that the Central Eastern European countries are not ready for these types of democracies which are living now within the EU, and that this is a time to get back to pre-1989. So the question is, how would Europe look like if there won't be the enlargement in 2004? Maybe it will be back to the Soviet Union and the Soyuz itself. Who knows? But I want to get back to this question about the necessary reforms also internally within the EU to get ready for the enlargement. And I think that, speaking from my position as a representative of the European Commission, there is a clear understanding that there needs to be, as I said, safeguards for member states, that they need to get ready, that the whole European Union needs to get ready for the next enlargement. And this is why there is this announcement of the review process on how the entire European agenda as it stands now would be influenced by the enlargement, and also how we can make sure that the impact would not be that it will just fall apart. So this is why colleagues within the different directorate generals in Brussels or Luxembourg, or I don't know, they are now working on the documents which are available already, and they are trying to see, how the entire enlargement, if we go to the maximum extent, would influence the policies as it stays now. And you are familiar with the fact that European Commission changed its priorities for 2025, and the first time ever the security and defense became the priority number one for the entire European Union. And there is a first time ever European Commissioner for Defense or other defense industry, the great ex-Latvian Prime Minister, Andreas Kubilius. So everything is changing. Sorry. Lithuanian, I said. Okay, Lithuanian. No, Vilnius. Sorry, Rolandas. I took away your prime minister. So I think that, and somebody said that it is really challenging what we are experiencing today. Everything will be different tomorrow. I think that we don't just go with the flow, but we are trying to prepare for the challenges that might come in terms of security and defense. And I think this will be the major factor for the decision about the enlargement for member states, but this is only the perception of today, let's say.
Thank you very much. And if I may just briefly ask, you mentioned safeguards. So when we talk about safeguards, do you mean more in introducing safeguards for potential new member states, or would these safeguards apply to the European Union as a whole? But also, in what way do you think these safeguards would best be introduced to emphasize the credibility of the process? Because this was one of the key points that you were making before.
Yeah, we don't know yet what these safeguards will look like, but Pavel Telečka already said that sometimes enlargement doesn't bring only positive elements, but also the negative elements. Me, myself, before I took my role here in Prague, I've been working in Brussels, and I arrived in 2014 to work for the European Commission, and I had a Swedish assistant then. So I will share a kind of a personal story here that she told me, "Oh, you are Czech." I remember before 2004, we were so enthusiastic. You know, there was such a atmosphere of joy and some of the positive spirit before the enlargement. But now, look where we are. And it was 2014, so 11 years ago. And already the frustration was there. So I'm just leaving it there.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to ask if there is anybody else that would like to add something to this round of questions before we go to the next one.
Yes, please, Mr. Just to you, Excellency, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball and we can't travel in time, but I would guess that we would probably have a more coherent EU with a small number of member states. We might have an EU which would be more detached from some of the, let's say, security issues of today. The compromises would not be that much balanced by countries of Central and Eastern Europe as they are today. Economically difficult to judge. I think that it would be a downside for both the EU and us. In Central and Eastern Europe, we would have countries which would be vulnerable to the east, and we would have a sort of a buffer zone. But that's just really, speculating to a large degree. It would not be a great role. So if I said there are implications on the EU, I would say that the alternatives would have been much, much worse.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Or can we start with the second round of questions? Okay, so we have one question here, then another one, and then one at the far end.
Good afternoon, Paulina Žáková, Deputy Minister for European Affairs, outgoing Deputy Minister.
You never know.
Slowly, but certainly, yeah, I think. Thank you very much for your interventions. I have two questions. One is about the dichotomy between the technical and political process that Mr. Telečka spoke about, where until 2022, I think on both sides, the process went hand in hand. Actually, it was sleeping on both, let's say, on both fronts. Now we see a clear disconnect between the two. So on the technical process, a lot is happening, and it's led by the European Commission, where the European Commission advances with the technical talks with the candidate countries, both in the Western Balkans and Ukraine and Moldova. Whereas on the political front, we have a clear lack of unity. Whereas as regards Western Balkans, I think the motivation is different from the case of Ukraine, where Apparently 26 member states are in favor of advancing with the accession talks with Ukraine, and one member state blocking. My question is here: what are your what is, according to you, the perspective of enlargement? Maybe where can we be in 1 year time? We have one important piece of elections in the meantime, which can change a little bit the game. So the question is there a positive prospect for enlargement, let's say in 1 year? And my second question is on the public debate. Public debate, it was mentioned that in Czechia, enlargement is not a very popular topic among the Czech general public. Together with France, we are the least enthusiastic nation about EU enlargement, but we are least enthusiastic on many European things. And here the question is, what is the best strategy? Because our first response, first reaction is, let's talk about it more. Let's explain to citizens all the benefits and everything. But is it really a good strategy currently in the Czech Republic?
Thank you very much for those two questions. I'm assuming the second question is for the panel as a whole?
For the second question, I would say rather for the Czech speakers in the panel, because I don't know how much Andy Gateva and Harry Cimitras are let's say, familiar with the situation in Czechia. But maybe, well, if they want to intervene, of course.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And we had one question here and then one at the far end.
Thank you for the discussion. I'm Filip Ilankovic from Hungarian Institute of International Affairs. And, well, I just want to ask what's happening with this phrase, united in the diversity. So European Union should be something like this. And I just briefly want to reflect on Mr. Telička statements about some European Union leaders that want to dismantle the European Union. My view is a bit different on this. There are some, different opinions within the European Union, but it's not reflecting this phrase, united in diversity. So I have a feeling that these political motives are put forward are much more important in present days than this merit-based approach to the enlargement. So I just want to briefly reflect on that and ask you, can you say something more on this? Because I'm much more interested in this merit-based approach, which can be heard almost every day from the Brussels. But again, the political motives I'll always put above that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have the last question. We had somebody raise their hand at the end. We have 3 questions already, so we will wrap up this round here, and then we can open the floor for another round if time permits. So the first question that we have is on the technical versus the political tension when we have for the enlargement process. And I think it is to an extent related to the question that was mentioned from the audience as well on merit-based versus political. And I think the question is here, whether can one go without the other? Can we realistically even expect that without the political element, if we're just talking about merit or fulfilling technical criteria, or even having substantial reforms without the political support, can we actually have accession happening in the first place? So the second question that we have was about the public debate, which is another key moment, and maybe we can do more, but what more can we do in order to better support the public to understand the added value that the European Union brings? And again, the last point was about united in diversity, and how does this play out within the current situation of the EU? So I will give the floor to Mr. Telička, if you can potentially address the 3 of them in any order you see fit.
I'll have to take the order in which I will be able to pick in my memory. You know, at my age, it's not easy. Communication, a very good point. I'm afraid that we might have all the institutes, all the researchers, all the different European EU-related forums have debate and so on. But if we don't have the leaders engaged with a vision, with a determination, with a drive, with ability to confront quite not just disinformation, but quite often stupidities. If we don't have these leaders, the same ones that are in fact quite often creating these stupidities, it's extremely difficult battle. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fighter. I mean, we negotiated a time when we didn't have a political representation here in Prague that would be that enthusiastic about accession. For me, it was daily bread and butter fight in the Czech government. So it is difficult, but it has to be done. But I think it has to be done first on topics that are of relevance to the public. I'm afraid that issues like deepening won't matter to anybody. I'm afraid even enlargement, there I would be a little bit optimistic because I think what the Czechs are, let's say, skeptical, it's superficial. So if you've got a serious debate and a process, I mean, opening it up and etc., coming with the real issues, then as superficial as it is today skeptical, it might be superficially more optimistic or positive later on. So I would not be too concerned, not about us Czechs. So the question is the issues, and I think that if you wake up and you've got concerns, whether it's employment, salary, health, education, etc., you need to be able to demonstrate that EU integration deals with it or can deal with it and bring something that we consider as absolutely normal and maybe as a result of Czech politics, in fact, might be very much related to EU policy making. Now, the political and technical, yes, I think your description was correct, but I think the same applies to the candidate countries. I would say that if you go through a number of those, we shouldn't be misled. And if we look deeper into some of the candidate countries, I mean, the environment is difficult. I mean, remember just recent elections in Moldova. Great, but what if things would have been just a few percentage different? Yeah. What about Serbia? What about Georgia just a few years back? What about them today? What about some of the countries in the future? That is why the safeguards, or even the concept which I think I would tentatively be critical of gradual enlargement because it might be seen by many as postponement, but maybe that's the way to proceed. Yeah, is it the same? Maybe it's enlargement with some safeguards. Maybe it's something different. What will happen if we're going to have a few countries finishing the line and then 2 or 3 member states saying no in a referendum? It's going to blow up. So I think it's very serious, and I think we need to make sure that we do the best in matching the technical and political on the EU side, but as well as on the candidate country side. If I may, I'm also very much down to merit. That's why you will never hear from me unity in diversity, because it was demolished by many. It sounds today more of a cliche, but if you say merit-based, yes, I'm very much merit-based. And if you would say that sometimes the politics are in front of the carriage in the EU, yes, that's correct. That sometimes we get the policy making wrong, yes. Did we do well on every single legal act? Well, no, not really. Are we doing a great exercise on competitiveness? Not yet. But I mean, it's a process of 27 where, we might not have all the clues and the answers, and the compromises are difficult, but that's one issue. The second issue is, and that's where I refer to the leaders like Ficos, Orbáns, and so on. I'm sorry, but if you go to Moscow, you shake hands, you make deals with someone that is responsible for the death of hundreds and thousands of people, this is not diversity. This is, in fact, on turning your back on the rest of the European Union. This is about basically killing the values on which the whole enlargement process was also set. This is also fragmenting the accession and the membership obligations that you have. And I could continue. These are very different issues. And if you have basically politicians which are doing nothing by obstructing the decision making in the EU, and then visiting or inviting and dancing tango with Putin. Well, this is not a diversity. I mean, this is something completely different. So I'm not sure we are on the same line, but if yes, I'll be only happy. But if you would say, sometimes, the politics maybe in the desperate ambition to catch up or to drive and to deliver, yeah, we make wrong decisions. Yeah, we sometimes the compromise is, but compromise is also based on quite often obstructions, on blocking. I mean, what was Visegrad about in the last several years? I mean, give me one solid initiative which really contributed to a certain new energy initiative in the EU. I mean, all the leaders came back and said, we managed to kill that, even though it was not true. Even though those that are engaged know what happened at midnight. Yeah, how strong was Babiš or whoever in that meeting. So I mean, this is what we are facing. I mean, I don't see, from some of these countries, including Prague, I don't see the initiatives. I mean, the solutions. Some of them, yes, from Prague, but not too much. I mean, referring back to de Boissier when he spoke about the Baltics, and he said there are two countries that can legitimize enlargement, and Czech is one of them. Did we do a great job? No, we didn't. Yeah, because we have not utilized the potential that we had, and we still have. And I'm afraid that we might not be in for the best of days still in the coming period of time. And that's a real pity, because that is also then about your weight and your ability to steer the development of the European integration.
Thank you very much. And I think based on this discussion, potentially what we could do is to try to link and think, well, how can maybe some of the concerns that you raised affect public perceptions of the European Union citizens with what is happening within Europe as a whole, with the enlargement process, and more broadly in the EU as an international actor? So should we think about, can we actually learn some lessons from the past in order to improve public perceptions? And also, how can we make the European debate a bit more popular with the citizens? So first I will give a word to Ms. Ladmarova, and then afterwards, if we have any experiences from other EU member states that Ms. Gatava and Ms. Dimitris can share with us.
Thank you for calling me up, but I work for the European Commission, so the European Commission will do what it will be the task coming from the member states in this regard, speaking about the communication. And one lessons learned maybe could be that it doesn't stop with the accession. There needs to be still a strong communication coming from the member state who acceded to the EU towards its citizens, to explain why it happened and for what it was good, maybe for what it was not, for the citizens that they need to really contribute, but still, what are the benefits of the EU membership? And if you compare the numbers regarding the trust in the EU, you will find big differences between member states. In Denmark, Portugal, Finland, Luxembourg, there is more than 70% of the support and trust into the EU as a structure, into the EU institutions, etc., etc. When you compare the other end, is the Czech Republic, it is Slovenia and Greece. So you can come and see what are the reasons for this discrepancies, but it's not the same in each member state. And the question is how we can also influence now the enlargement moods and attitudes in the current member states. As I said, Czech Republic, France, Italy, they are and Netherlands, of course, as well. Ireland belong to member states where the mood is actually not the best towards the future enlargement, but it is still more than 50% for each single country which has been now listed as the most advancing. So there is work to be done on both sides, I think, the candidate countries and also the current member states. European Commission will do whatever it will take, to make sure that the communication is in line with the political decision of the leaders. Currently, as I've mentioned, there is this review process undermaking. There is the enlargement report published every year, and there is a great Slovenian member of the College of Commissioners who is doing her best. She's traveling every day in different countries, explaining, trying to understand, also going to the candidate countries and sitting on the files really as we speak. She's very active, and she was in Czech Republic already twice since she took her office, and it's exactly 1 year. So imagine that there is 27 member states plus the candidate countries, but she already made time to come twice to Czech Republic to meet with the stakeholders and to discuss the enlargement issue. So much about communication, but I think it's not enough and we need more.
Thank you. So we can see that there is support from the European Commission side when it comes to this communication and dissemination of information strategy. However, a big part of this is still within the hands of EU member states and what they can and what they're willing to do. And I can see that, Ms. Dimitras, you are nodding. Would you have anything to add on this topic?
Thank you for saying this, and it gives me a little hope. I was hoping to add something that might not give us hope otherwise, and that's the following. I'm sure that the Commission and other EU organs are doing their best, but I'm not quite sure how it resonates with the average person. I really don't know. And it's an honest, yes, it's an honest question. I don't know, but my feeling is that it doesn't. It's obviously that people have concerns, very tangible concerns of the daily that are not helped. I'm very glad that Mr. Telička talks about leadership crisis. I would have thought a little bit of crisis of values as well. And I'm saying this because, to me, the EU is exactly about that. If you take this away from the EU, it's nothing. And I'm further saying this because if the intent is for the EU to become more geopolitical, which I understand from a pragmatic point of view, to my mind, it needs to become also more transactional. Hence, bye-bye on the values. But if this is the case, I'm sorry to say that, again, to me, the EU is not equipped to deal with autocratic leaders, with handshake cultures, it's doing a wonderful job with its money in certain parts of the world. The Gulf doesn't need money. So they're going to impose terms either on us or others that we're competing with. China doesn't need money. So I'm afraid that, it's a little bit of an introvert discussion where we have, and the distance we take from principles strikes at the very basis of what the EU is and what the organization that others want to accede to is. You mentioned Moscow, and I think you're very right. But forgive me for saying it's the same with Cairo and Tel Aviv. So yeah, it could be Eisenhower saying that they are, but they're ours. Okay, I understand. But the moral argument that Europe has been standing for, not only in Gaza, where what we didn't do, I think, undermined the moral edifice of things, it also will spill over in other things. The transition to renewable energy has a very significant moral precept to it. That is also, I think, dealt a blow with. If I understand it correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, the EU is already backing off from targets on transition, perhaps understandably from a realpolitik point of view. But it doesn't land us in a place where the people say, what we understand the EU to be and we aspire to be part of this is not there anymore. So if we're not pragmatic, or we are pragmatic but not that, I'm not quite sure where it lands us. Maybe I don't get it right, and I hope I don't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to ask Ms. Gatova if you can maybe shed light on, again, some of these issues that were discussed so far as a wrap-up of this round, and potentially considering your work experience within the UK. When we're talking about public perceptions of the EU, maybe we can throw in some of your main experiences, maybe potentially related to your research or insights of what we can learn from that as well.
Excellent, thank you. Well, UK is an interesting place to give reflection on enlargement, and I will share with you. I was invited. There was a conference that was organized with José Barroso. It was maybe less than 2 months before the referendum in 2016. And the debate was, again, about public opinion and what the European Commission can and cannot do. And he elaborated that the European Commission will not intervene, will not support, but when they were having brainstorming sessions and reflections about how to boost the pro-EU messaging, one of the things that came up was the contributions of the UK to the European project. And enlargement is one of the biggest contributions of the UK to the European project, but this was perceived to have been weaponized by far-right forces in the UK and basically say, how are we going to go and say, go and sell your contribution, enlargement is one of the biggest achievements that you have championed for and achieved, when you had Farage basically running the anti-EU campaign or the Leave campaign, saying that 80 million Turks are going to come to the UK because Turkey is joining the European Union now that it is a candidate country. So I think that there is, and this is an important lesson to reflect on, how easy enlargement has been weaponized and instrumentalized by forces who are keen to undermine the European project. So that's why I think it's crucial that public communication is a much more how should I say, effective, and the key is, I mean, I'm sure that the Commissioner is doing a great job and the Commission, but it should come from political leadership in EU member states. Because I think that it was, I mean, we've had this discussion and maybe it was one of the questions. France has amended its constitution to hold a referendum on the next enlargement of the European Union. So imagine if you go through the whole process and there's, oh, we had this, I mean, Austria was toying with the idea as well. And we need to have a referendum. How easy it will be if you haven't built up consistent message or engaged with it, why this is important to us. And then obviously different leaders will know better how to translate the benefits of enlargement in their specific context, because as you have mentioned, it varies widely across different member states. And this leads back to, I think that there was a point about a merit-based process and the EU delivering. I think that it is also important when we have a specific message and awareness in candidate countries as well, that the reforms that member states do are not for the sake of someone sitting in Brussels. These reforms are delivered in order to make everyone's lives better. So taking ownership of the significance of these reforms and taking value from delivering these reforms, there should be still a value of the admission and accession process. I mean, obviously becoming a member is the ultimate goal and aim, but importantly, there should be value in the process in everyday policy making and gradually improving the economic and the political situation in candidate and enlargement countries. So I think that this is also a message, at least my understanding has been that many of the Central and Eastern European candidates say we are doing this reform for Brussels. I think it's important to phrase it as we are doing this reform for us because we want to address these problems, and this will also help us become a member of the European Union. And my final point is there was a question about the challenges between technical and political. I would say everything is political, and we have seen also the weaponization of the technical process because now we have opening benchmarks, interim benchmarks, closing benchmarks. So everything is political.
Exactly. It's also a question of how do we define merit? How do we define what are the criteria that we are imposing or are trying to ask the countries actually the ones that will yield the most results? So it's a bigger question of, as you said, the technical process. We are running out of time, Salona. Was that the question that we need to ask? Okay, so one very short question for just one speaker, and we can wrap up the discussion. Okay, so if we can have the microphone.
10-minute speech.
No, it's not a speech. Cyprus Ambassador Aliki Pascali, because Cyprus was mentioned before, I wanted to say that Cyprus, the problem is not Cyprus, which complied with all prerequisites for accession. The real problem is Turkey, which occupies militarily a foreign independent country in violation of international law. Even if the question of Cyprus did not exist, Turkey could not be eligible for accession for many other reasons. Just I wanted to say this. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much for that comment. I will offer Mr. Dimitris if you would like to say something, or if any of the other panelists would like to add something as a final remark.
Long live Europe.
In that case, I would like to thank you for taking the time to join us here in Prague and to have this very fruitful and valuable discussion on lessons learned. I hope we've learned some lessons from today as well, and let's keep the discussion going. Thank you so much.